The Varath corridor was a cold and quiet place. It sat between two massive asteroid belts, far from any star, far from any busy trade route. Ships only came through here when they wanted to avoid attention. The corridor was narrow, dark, and surrounded by drifting rocks on both sides. It was not a place most captains liked. It was, however, a perfect place for a trap. The Keth had used it before. 9 Keth warships sat in complete silence at the far end of the corridor. Their engines were powered down. Their lights were off. They floated in the dark like stones, invisible against the black of space. They had been waiting for 6 hours. They were patient. The Keth were always patient when they hunted. High Warlord Sekathvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Fist. He was tall, even for a Keth. His skin was deep gray, marked with the dark red patterns that showed his rank and his victories. He had 4 eyes, each one a pale amber color, and right now all 4 were fixed on the long-range scanner in front of him. The scanner showed one single ship, moving slowly through the Varath corridor. It was a human vessel. Sekathvar studied it for a long moment. The ship was big, long, and wide, with a boxy shape that the Keth recognized from their intelligence files. The humans called it a carrier class. It was built to carry smaller ships and supplies. It was not built for war. Not seriously. Not the kind of war the Keth knew. "Confirm the class," Sekathvar said quietly. His senior officer, a younger Keth named Vethorin, tapped at his panel. "Confirmed, Warlord, mid-range carrier, standard configuration. Crew estimate between 300 and 400. Weapon systems are low-grade by our standards. No escort ships detected." Sekathvar made a low sound in his chest, a kind of satisfaction. A lone carrier, no escort, moving through the one corridor in this sector with no fast exit route. Either the humans were bold or they were foolish. In Sekathvar's experience, when prey walked into the open like this, it was always the second one. "Formation," he said. The 9 Keth warships came alive. Their engines lit up one by one. They moved smoothly and without noise into the positions they had rehearsed hundreds of times. 3 ships spread wide to the left. 3 spread wide to the right. 2 moved above and below. And the flagship moved directly ahead, blocking the corridor exit. It was called the Final Embrace. The Keth had used it against 8 different species over 3 centuries. Not one had escaped. Some had fought. Most had surrendered the moment they saw the formation close around them. A few had tried to run and been destroyed before they even turned around. The Final Embrace was not just a tactic. It was a message. It said, "This is over," before it began. The human ship continued moving forward. Slowly, steadily. It did not speed up. It did not change direction. It did not try to retreat. It just kept going like it had not noticed anything unusual at all. Sekathvar watched it with his 4 pale eyes. He gave the order to hail. The communications officer opened the channel. A soft tone sounded, and then the translator unit spoke in the flat, clear voice it always used for surrender demands. The words were transmitted in 17 different languages, including the primary human one. "Vessel of the human species, you are surrounded by the forces of the Keth Dominion. You have no escape route and no capacity to resist. Power down your weapon systems. Order your crew to stand down. Prepare to be boarded. Full compliance will result in the humane treatment of all living crew members. Resistance will result in your immediate destruction. You have 90 seconds to respond." The channel stayed open. Sekathvar waited. Seconds passed. The human ship still did not change course. It did not slow down. Its weapon systems, according to the scanner, were still in their default low-power state. Nothing moved on the outside of the ship. No signals went out. No distress calls. No response at all. Vethorin looked at his warlord. "No response, sir." "Wait," Sekathvar said. More seconds passed, 30, 40. The human ship kept moving. Sekathvar began to wonder if the translator had malfunctioned, Or perhaps the crew was simply too frightened to speak. That happened sometimes. Prey froze. It was a biological response, he had read. Fear so strong it stopped the body from acting. Then the channel crackled. A voice came through. A human voice. It was calm. It did not sound afraid. It did not sound angry. It sounded almost like someone who had just been interrupted while doing something else entirely. "Give us a minute, we're finishing breakfast." The bridge of the Dominion's fist went completely silent. Sekathvar stared at the speaker panel as if it might say something more useful if he looked at it long enough. His communications officer turned slowly in his chair. Vethorin blinked once, then again. Even the background hum of the flagship's engine seemed to go quieter, as though the ship itself was unsure what had just happened. Sekathvar had received many responses to the final embrace. He had received pleas. He had received threats. He had received silence. He had received declarations of war from species that lasted exactly 40 seconds before their ships were turned to dust. He had never received that. "They are finishing breakfast," Vethorin said slowly, as if repeating it out loud would help it make sense. "I heard it," Sekathvar said. He looked back at the scanner. The human ship was still moving, still calm, still not doing anything that made tactical sense. His formation was perfectly set. All 9 ships were in position. The final embrace was fully closed. There was nowhere the carrier could go, and yet its crew was, apparently, eating. Something small and cold moved through Sekathvar's chest. It was not quite fear. He was a warlord. He did not feel fear from a single carrier with no escort. But it was something like confusion, and in his many years of commanding warships, confusion had never been a comfortable feeling. "Scan again," he said. "Full detail, I want everything." Vethorin ran the scan. The results came back the same. 1 carrier, standard class, light weapons, crew of roughly 300 to 400, no hidden ships detected nearby, no reinforcements on long-range sensors. Everything said this should be the easiest capture of the year. Everything except that voice. Sekathvar crossed his arms behind his back and watched the screen. The human ship was closer now, still on the same heading, still not reacting. He told himself it was arrogance. He told himself the humans simply did not understand yet what they were facing. He told himself that the moment they looked out their viewports and saw 9 Keth warships surrounding them, the calm would end. He told himself all of this. But he kept watching the scanner, and the cold feeling in his chest did not go away. Outside in the dark corridor, the unbroken meridian continued forward through the black, slow, steady, giving nothing away. Around it, 9 ships formed a perfect, unbeatable cage. And on the human ship, no alarm was sounding. Captain Yara Solis put her coffee cup down on the armrest of her command chair and looked at the tactical screen in front of her. The screen showed 9 red markers arranged in a tight circle around the single blue dot that represented her ship. She studied the formation for a few seconds. Then she picked up her coffee again and took another sip. "Sable," she said, "how long have they been in position?" The ship's AI answered immediately. Its voice was smooth and without emotion, the kind of voice that made information feel like simple fact rather than alarm. "The Keth formation completed final positioning 4 minutes and 12 seconds ago, Captain. All 9 vessels are holding station. No weapons have been charged to full power yet." "Yet," said Lieutenant Darrow Finch from the weapons station to her left. He was young, with dark circles under his eyes from a long shift, and he was already pulling up targeting data on his secondary screen. "Yet," Sable confirmed. Solis leaned back in her chair. She was not a tall woman, and she was not a loud one. She had a plain face, short dark hair that was starting to gray at the sides, and the kind of stillness that only came from spending 20 years in the middle of dangerous situations and walking out of all of them. Her uniform had a small tear on the left sleeve that she had never bothered to fix. She did not look like most people's idea of a warship captain. She was exactly what the Keth thought she wasn't. Behind her, at the communications station, a young ensign named Petra Waz was already recording everything. She had a small personal datapad propped beside her console, its light blinking steadily. When her colleague at the adjacent station gave her a questioning look, she shrugged and mouthed, "Command is never going to believe this." Solis glanced around the bridge. Her crew was moving not frantically, not urgently, just steadily. Hands moving across panels, eyes on screens, voices low and focused. No one was frozen. No one was waiting for permission to start doing their job. They had trained for this. Not this specific situation, perhaps, but any situation where the math looked bad and the only option was to think faster than the problem. "Give me the full picture," Solis said. Sable responded without pause. The formation is a classic Keth encirclement pattern, designated in their tactical doctrine as the final embrace. 9 ships total. 2 are heavy-class warships, including what appears to be the flagship at the corridor exit. 4 are mid-range combat vessels. 3 are lighter attack ships, likely used for speed interception. All ships are positioned to block retreat, close flanking routes, and cut off the corridor exit. Weaknesses. The formation is designed for prey that attempts to flee or scatter. It assumes the target ship will either surrender in place or attempt to break out toward one of 3 predictable exit vectors. It does not account for a target that advances directly at the flagship. Darrow Finch turned his head slowly. "We're going at the flagship." "I didn't say that yet," Solis said calmly. "Sable kind of implied it." "Sable implies a lot of things, that's why she's useful." Solis set her cup down again and sat forward. "What's our real readout, full ship status?" Sable's response was precise. The unbroken meridian was not what her hull suggested. From the outside, she looked exactly like a standard mid-class carrier, wide, boxy, unremarkable. That was the point. Her real configuration had been built in a classified dry dock 14 months ago and had never appeared in any public fleet registry. Her outer hull was layered with reactive armor plating, rated to absorb concentrated fire from multiple warships simultaneously. Her apparent cargo bays housed 4 rows of retractable mass driver batteries, each one capable of punching through the hull of a heavy warship at close range. Her propulsion system had been overhauled twice, giving her a burst speed that no carrier of her apparent class should have possessed. And then there was Sable herself. Sable was not a standard navigation and operations AI. She had been built specifically for this kind of situation, outnumbered, surrounded, expected to fail. In the 4 minutes and 12 seconds since the Keth formation had closed, she had already mapped the precise location of every ship, identified their exhaust vent positions, calculated 312 different engagement sequences, and ranked them by probability of success. She had been ready to fight before the Keth had finished getting into position. Down in the engineering decks, Chief Engineer Tamaz Reyes was walking fast between stations, not running, just walking with purpose. His team was rerouting power from non-essential systems to weapons and shields. No one shouted. No one asked questions that weren't necessary. The corridors of the Meridian were busy but quiet, filled with the kind of focused noise that came from people who knew exactly what they were doing. In the lower weapons bay, 2 technicians were removing the hull panel covers from the forward mass driver array. The panels looked like ordinary cargo doors from the outside. They opened in under 10 seconds. The Keth scanners had read them as exactly what they appeared to be, cargo bays, because the panels had been closed, because the weapons behind them were powered to standby, not active, because the Meridian had been designed to look exactly as harmless as possible for exactly this kind of moment. Back on the bridge, Solis was reading through Sable's tactical breakdown on her personal screen. She read it the way she read everything, carefully, without rushing, without jumping to conclusions. She cross-checked 2 points. She asked Sable one quiet, clarifying question about the flagship's shield rotation cycle. She nodded once. Then she looked up at her crew. "All right," she said. The word was not loud. It was not a battle cry. It was the same tone she used when approving a resupply request or signing off on a maintenance report. But her crew heard it and knew exactly what it meant, because they had served with her long enough to understand that when she said "all right" in that particular way, the calm part was ending. Sable, calculate firing sequence. Priority on their propulsion systems first. I want the 3 flanking ships immobile before they can react. Finch, get the forward battery array online. Rays, I need full power to shields in 90 seconds. Aye, Captain. Done, Captain. 90 seconds, copy. Solis looked at the main view screen, at the cold, dark corridor ahead and the 9 ships waiting in it. Nobody leaves this corridor, she said. The unbroken meridian moved forward. On the Keth flagship, Sekathvar was still waiting for a second response. He had given the humans more than their requested minute. He was starting to consider whether to fire a single warning shot, something to remind them that the situation was serious. His translator unit was ready to send another demand. He never got the chance to send it. The hull panels on the human ship opened. The first shots from the unbroken meridian did not go toward the flagship. They went sideways. 3 of the Keth flanking ships, the ones positioned to cut off the corridor's left and right edges, took direct hits to their engine blocks before their crews had finished processing the fact that the human ship had opened its cargo panels. The strikes were clean and precise, not random, not desperate. They hit the exact same location on each ship, the rear propulsion cluster, just below the main thruster housing, where the armor was thinnest and the fuel lines were closest to the surface. Sable had known this for 4 minutes and 27 seconds. All 3 ships went dark at the same moment, not destroyed, disabled. Their engines died. Their thruster output dropped to 0. They began to drift slowly, carried only by their existing momentum, no longer capable of holding formation or changing course. In one strike package, the Meridian had removed 3 of the 9 ships from the equation entirely. On the bridge of the Dominion's fist, Sekathvar felt the cold thing in his chest become something sharper. Return fire, he ordered. The remaining 6 Keth ships opened up. Plasma bolts and beam weapons converged on the human carrier from multiple angles. They hit. Several of them hit squarely. The Meridian's shields flared white and then orange in the places where the energy was absorbed. The hull shook. Lights on the bridge flickered for a second. A secondary panel at the navigation station sparked and went dark. Solis gripped her armrest. Damage. Shields at 74%, Sable said. Hull integrity nominal. Minor damage to secondary sensor array port side. Repair team is already moving. Keep going. The Meridian did not stop. It did not slow down. It absorbed the Keth fire and kept advancing like something that had been hit before and had simply decided that being hit was not a reason to stop. The Keth fired again and again. The shields held. They dropped further, 61%, 58%, but they held. Down in engineering, Tamaz Reyes was watching his readouts with narrow eyes. His team was managing power distribution in real time, shifting shield energy to the areas taking the most fire, pulling reserves from systems that didn't need them right now. It was not a single action. It was 100 small actions happening at the same time, coordinated by people who had drilled this scenario until it felt like breathing. Left flank is going to overheat, one of his technicians said. Rotate it, Reyes said. Push the load to the dorsal layer. Already on it. Reyes nodded and moved to the next station. Back in the corridor, the shape of the battle was changing in ways the Keth had not planned for. The 3 disabled ships were drifting. One of them had begun to rotate slowly, its dead bulk now floating across the path of a Keth mid-range vessel on the right side of the formation. That ship had to break position to avoid a collision, pulling it out of its firing arc and creating a gap in the encirclement. Sable noticed the gap the instant it appeared. Forward battery, second target package, Solis said, and she did not need to explain further because Sable was already executing. The Meridian's mass driver batteries rotated smoothly on their mounts. The sound inside the ship was a deep, rhythmic thudding, not chaotic, but steady, almost mechanical, like a heartbeat. Each shot was heavy and fast, designed to punch through armor rather than burn through shields. They were not energy weapons. They did not flash or glow. They simply hit and things broke. Two of the mid-range Keth warships took direct hits to their forward hull sections. One lost its main weapon array completely. The other took damage to its bridge module, not enough to destroy it, but enough to kill its command crew and leave it running on emergency systems, turning in slow circles with no one able to steer it. 5 ships were now out of the fight. 4 remained. Sekathvar was standing now, his 4 eyes moving rapidly between his tactical display and the viewscreen. The human ship was still coming. It was closer now, much closer, and the corridor walls were narrowing on both sides, which meant his ships had less room to maneuver, less room to spread out, less room to do anything except face forward and fight. He had designed the final embrace to compress the prey, to close the walls in, to leave no space for movement. The corridor was now compressing his own fleet. "All ships focus fire on the forward hull," he commanded. "Hit it from every angle, overwhelm the shields." The 4 remaining Keth ships did as ordered. The combined fire was heavy. The Meridian's shields dropped to 39%, then 32%. An actual hull breach opened on the lower port side, small, contained immediately by emergency bulkhead systems, but a breach nonetheless. The ship shuddered from the impact. Petra was, still recording at her communication station, grabbed the edge of her console to keep herself steady. The datapad tipped and clattered to the floor. She grabbed it, checked it was still recording, and put it back. Soli said nothing about the breach. She was already reading Sable's next recommendation. "Burst drive," she said. 3-second pulse now. The Meridian's hidden propulsion system fired. For 3 seconds the ship moved at a speed that no carrier of its class should have been capable of. The Keth vessels on the corridor flanks, already close, suddenly had a human warship traveling directly through their formation at attack speed. The shock of it was instant. 2 ships tried to break away. 1 succeeded. The other did not move fast enough. The Meridian passed it at close range, and the mass drivers fired at point-blank distance. That ship did not survive. 3 remaining. Sekathvar was gripping the edge of his console with both hands. He could see on the tactical screen how his formation had collapsed. The perfect geometry of the final embrace, the carefully placed ring of ships, the sealed exits, the controlled lines of fire was gone. It had become a loose, scattered cluster of damaged vessels in a narrow corridor, and the human ship was in the middle of it, turning, fighting, firing. The prey was not in the middle of the cage. The prey was hunting. "Warlord," Vethorin's voice was quieter than usual. "2 of our remaining ships are reporting critical damage. 1 is requesting permission to withdraw." Sekathvar did not answer for a moment. He was watching the human ship take another hit from his flagship's batteries and absorb it, watched its shields pulse and hold, watched it turn smoothly toward his next vessel. In 3 centuries, the final embrace had never failed. It had never needed to be reconsidered mid-battle. It had always ended the same way. The prey powered down, gave up, or was destroyed. This was not ending that way. Vethorin said softly, "Sir, what are your orders?" Sekathvar opened his mouth, and for the first time in his life as a Keth warlord, he did not have an answer ready. 3 weeks before the ambush in the Verath corridor, a Keth analyst named Threvivis had stood in a war council chamber and tried to say something that no one wanted to hear. The chamber was large and cold, as all Keth military rooms were. The walls were dark stone. The lights were harsh and white. Around a long table sat 12 senior officers, all of them with the red rank markings of commanders and warlords. At the head of the table had been Sekathvar himself, arms crossed, patient, already decided. Threvis was smaller than the others. She was a researcher, not a soldier. Her skin was lighter gray and she had no rank markings, only the plain collar of the intelligence division. She had brought a datapad. She had spent 3 weeks preparing what was on it. She had been given 5 minutes. "The humans are not like the other species we have engaged," she had said, speaking quickly but clearly. "Their biology is unusual. When they experience extreme stress or danger, their bodies produce high amounts of a chemical called cortisol and another called adrenaline. In most species, these chemicals cause hesitation, shaking, confusion. In humans, they cause sharper focus, faster reaction time, a reduction in the fear of pain." One of the senior officers had made a dismissive sound. Threvis had continued. "Their history of warfare spans thousands of years. They have fought each other for territory, for resources, for ideas. They have fought disease, famine, and climate collapse. Every time they have faced destruction as a species, they have adapted rather than surrendered. Their military doctrine is built on the assumption that they will take damage, not that they might take damage, that they will. They build their ships expecting to be hit. They train their soldiers expecting to lose ground and continue fighting anyway. There is a concept in their culture with no direct translation in our language. The closest I can get is the second wind. It refers to the moment when a human body, pushed past its limits, finds more." She had looked around the table. No one had been writing anything down. "I am recommending that we reclassify humanity in our threat assessment files. They should not be listed as a moderate-risk species. They should be. They are soft-bodied and short-lived," Sekathvar had said, not unkindly, simply as a fact. "All mammals break. We have engaged 14 mammalian species. Every one of them broke. The humans will be no different." Threvis had looked at him for a moment. Then she had lowered her datapad and said nothing more. She had been wrong about one thing, she thought later. She had asked for a reclassification in a file. She should have asked them to call off the ambush entirely. On the bridge of the Dominion's Fist, Sekathvar had 3 ships left. His own flagship, one mid-range vessel that had taken moderate damage to its port side, and one lighter attack ship that was moving erratically because its pilot was dead, and its second-in-command had only been flying for 2 years. The unbroken Meridian was between all 3 of them. Its shields had recovered slightly. Sable had pulled reserve power into the shield matrix during the burst drive maneuver, and the brief pause in heavy fire had given the system a chance to stabilize. The hull breach on the port side had been sealed. The weapons were still cycling. The ship was still moving. Sekathvar stared at the tactical display and tried to find the pattern he was missing. There had to be something, a weakness, a limit. The ship's shields had dropped significantly. That meant they could be overwhelmed. If all 3 of his remaining ships concentrated fire on one point, the shields would fail. The hull would be exposed. He ordered it. All 3 ships aimed at the same section of the Meridian's hull and fired together. The shields dropped to 14%. The hull buckled in 2 places. An explosion flashed briefly along the upper deck. Something had been hit. Something had given way. The human ship rolled slightly, not much, but enough to see. Sekathvar leaned forward, again. They fired again. The shields collapsed entirely. For 4 seconds the Meridian was unprotected. It did not stop. It turned toward the mid-range Keth vessel, the closer of the 2 smaller ships, and hit it with a full battery discharge at close range. The mid-range ship broke apart, not damaged, not disabled, gone. 2 ships left. The human ship's shields began rebuilding from zero. Vethorin said very quietly, "How is it still?" "Don't," Sekathvar said. He opened the hail channel himself this time. No translator droid. His own voice. He did not know exactly why. Perhaps because he needed to hear an answer with his own ears. "Human vessel," he paused. "What are you?" The channel was quiet for a moment. He could hear background sound from the other ship, voices, movement, the low hum of systems running. Normal sounds, working sounds, not panic. Then the same voice as before, calm, a little tired. "We're the ones who didn't surrender." Sekethvar stood still for a long time after that. He had sent the surrender demand. He had offered painless treatment. He had given them time. He had surrounded them with 9 warships and left no exit, and they had sat there eating breakfast, opened their hull panels, and spent the last 22 minutes systematically taking apart everything he had built over a lifetime of warfare. They had not been afraid. Not once, not for a second. He thought of Threvelis and her datapad and her 5 minutes. He thought of the phrase she had used, the second wind. He thought about a species that, when pushed past its limits, found more. He had thought she was being dramatic. He understood now that she had been describing something real, something that had no equivalent in Keth experience, because the Keth had never fought anything like this. There was an old Keth tradition for commanders who faced certain defeat and refused capture. It was not celebrated. It was understood. A ship at ramming speed was a final act, not of victory, but of pride, of going out as a soldier rather than as a prisoner. Sekethvar looked at his last attack ship, drifting and uncertain. He opened a channel to its acting commander and told the young officer to withdraw, to go home, to tell what had happened. Then he looked at Vethorin. "Clear the bridge," he said. Vethorin did not move for a moment. Then he did as ordered, ushering the remaining crew out, leaving Sekethvar alone with the screens and the dark of the corridor outside. He set the flagship to full engine thrust, directly toward the meridian. On the human ship's bridge, Sable spoke before Solis needed to ask. "Flagship is moving, ramming trajectory, impact in 41 seconds. Solis looked at the screen, she looked at the distance, she looked at the speed. "Take the shot," she said. Sable fired. At 400 meters, the Dominion's fist came apart. Not in a single explosion, but in a series of them, each one triggering the next as fuel lines and power cores failed in sequence. The debris spread across the width of the corridor and then slowly, silently, began to drift. The last Keth attack ship, the one Sekethvar had dismissed, turned and ran. The corridor was quiet. Solis sat back in her chair. She looked around the bridge at Finch, who had his eyes closed for 1 second before opening them again, at Petra Waz, who was still recording and had tears running down her face that she didn't seem to notice, at the damage readouts showing everything that had broken and cracked and been sealed and rerouted in the last 25 minutes. "Damage report," she said. Sable gave it. It was long. "Get Rays started on repairs," Solis said, "and someone make fresh coffee. We're going to be here a while." The Verath corridor looked different after the battle. It was not quiet in the same empty way it had been quiet before. Now it was full of debris, long pieces of torn hull plating, broken weapon arrays, chunks of engine housing that tumbled slowly end over end in the dark. Here and there, small fires burned briefly where pressurized compartments had split open and then went out as the oxygen was consumed. The asteroid belts on both sides were unchanged, unmoved, indifferent. The unbroken meridian held position in the center of it all. The 2 surviving Keth ships, the ones that had been disabled in the first strike but not destroyed, were still drifting. Their engines were gone, but their hulls were intact and their life support was still running. Sable had confirmed this within minutes of the last shot being fired. The crews inside were alive. Solis read the report and made a decision without hesitating. She ordered 2 of the Meridian's repair shuttles out to the disabled ships, carrying a small team each, not soldiers, but engineers with basic medical supplies. Their job was simple: check for injured crew, provide what help they could, and leave the Keth ships with enough fuel cell units to get themselves moving again. Not enough to get back to Keth Dominion space under their own power, but enough to drift to the edge of the corridor where a rescue ship could eventually reach them. Lieutenant Finch had looked at her when she gave the order. Not with disagreement, he was too professional for that, but with a look that asked the question he didn't say out loud. "They ambushed us," Soli said simply. "They're still people. Patch them up and send them home." No one argued. The repair teams went out. The work took 2 hours. The Keth crews, according to the shuttle team's reports, were mostly in shock. They did not resist. They did not speak much. Several of them had injuries from when their ships took the first hits: broken bones, burns, lacerations from flying panel fragments. The human engineers treated what they could. One of the Keth on the first ship, a young male with a gash across his arm, had stared at the human medic working on him for a long time before finally saying something in Keth. The medic didn't understand the language, but she smiled at him anyway. He didn't smile back. Keth mouths didn't work that way, but his 4 eyes followed her as she moved, and the rigidity in his posture eased just slightly. When the shuttle teams returned, Solis released both ships and watched them drift slowly toward the corridor entrance. She stood at the view screen for a moment, then turned away. "Sable, start compiling the incident report." "Already started, Captain." "Good." She looked around the bridge. "Get some rest, everyone. We'll begin repairs in the morning shift." The 2 Keth survivors reached a rescue ship 6 days later. Their stories reached Keth Dominion High Command 8 days after that. The accounts were consistent. They were also, by all reports, deeply unsettling to everyone who heard them. 1 carrier, 9 warships, 40 minutes. The High Command chamber went quiet in a way it had not gone quiet since the last major war. No one spoke for a long time. Then someone asked for the full recording from the second disabled ship, which had kept its external sensors running during the battle. It was played on the main display. Everyone watched it without speaking. When it was over, a senior officer said, "They treated the survivors." No one had an immediate response to that either. Analyst Threvis received a message 2 days later. It was short. It told her to report to a new office twice as large as her previous one, and that her research budget had been increased by a factor of 12. The message was signed by the senior intelligence commander, and at the bottom, in a personal note that was not standard for official communications, it said, "You were right. We should have listened." Threvis sat with that message for a long time. She did not feel satisfied. She felt tired and a little sad, the way anyone feels when being proven right costs more than being ignored would have. She reported to her new office the next morning and started working. The news spread beyond the Keth. In the Galactic Council, a loose gathering of species that monitored major interstellar events and occasionally tried to prevent them from becoming catastrophes, word of the Verath corridor engagement moved quickly. Not through official announcements, but through the informal channels that have always carried the most important information: quiet conversations between diplomats, whispers in corridors, messages sent between intelligence offices. The Velhari, a species with 4 arms and a long history of careful political calculation, had 2 ships in a nearby sector that had been quietly watching human expansion routes for the past year. Their senior diplomat, a careful woman named Ischavel, recalled both ships within a week of hearing the full account. She did not explain publicly. She did not need to. A Moran trade representative, speaking to a contact from another species at a council reception, said it in the way that simple things are sometimes said when there is nothing more complicated to add. They ambushed a single human ship, 9 against 1, and the humans filed a report. His contact looked at him. "That's it, they just filed a report." "That's it," Ischavel said. She was passing by and had heard. She did not stop walking. And then they repaired their ship and continued their patrol. The unbroken Meridian returned to Frontier Station 11 days after the engagement. She came in on a standard approach, at standard speed, her hull showing the visible marks of the battle, scored plating, replaced panels that were a slightly different shade than the original, one antenna housing that was clearly a temporary repair. She did not come in with an escort. She did not broadcast anything on open channels. She docked like a ship coming back from a long shift. Captain Solis was met at the dock by Fleet Admiral Rain, a broad man with white hair and the look of someone who had read the incident report 3 times and still had questions. He shook her hand. He told her there would be a full debrief. He told her that the Admiralty was recommending her for promotion to Admiral, effective immediately. Solis thanked him. Then she told him, politely but clearly, that she preferred the ship. Rain looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded as if this was not surprising and walked with her toward the debrief room. Behind them, Petra Waz walked off the ship with her personal datapad held carefully under her arm. The recording was still on it, the whole thing, from the first hail to the last shot. She had already been asked 3 times by 3 different people if she would submit it to the Fleet Historical Archive. She said she would, after she made a backup copy. And in the quiet of the Meridian's now empty bridge, Sable updated the ship's log with the final entry for the engagement. Timestamp, coordinates, outcome, a list of damage sustained and repaired, the names of the 2 Keth vessels released, a note on crew status. The last line read, "All threats neutralized, crew status, nominal, resuming original heading, no further action required."